Hello, we're going to start the session right now. We have one of a very senior, extraordinary United Nations leader with us. Boaz PALDI is the Chief Creative Officer of the United Nations Development Program. He oversees global partnerships, campaigns, advocacy, communications. He's also an extraordinary man. He was a journalist and he covered the genocide in Rwanda. He covered the war in Chechnya. He covered the terrible war in South Sudan. He went into the places that people don't want to see. And now he's a leader at the United Nations Program for Development. Now, why is the United Nations Program for Development important? It's important because its mandate, listen to its objects: to end poverty, build democratic governance, the rule of law, inclusive societies, connecting people and countries together for the better lives of everybody. So he's in a place where when the word "we" is used, it means everybody. It doesn't just mean Turkey, United States, Chad, Russia. It means everybody. It doesn't mean just men or just women. It means everybody. It doesn't divide us by religion. It looks at the reality of the entire human family. And he is one of the leaders in this institution. And it's an honor to have Boaz as our opening speaker. Boaz, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. I thought I would just set the scene a little bit of what UNDP does and who we are. The United Nations Development Program, as we've known, we're about to celebrate our 60th anniversary. Maybe commemorate is a more accurate term because there's still so much work to be done. We've come a long way. As Jonathan said, and thank you so much for those kind words, Jonathan. Our main mandate is the reduction of poverty and inequality around the world. But we all know that that's not an easy task. The task of reducing poverty and inequality has multiple facets to it. We have to deal with women empowerment. We have to deal with democratic governance. We have to deal with water and sanitation. In Africa, as many of you must know, there is a huge problem with water and sanitation in people's homes. And instead of kids going to school, they fetch water, and so that continues the cycle of poverty on a regular basis. So we try and tackle all of those aspects of how we create an equal society, a better tomorrow for all. We are in about 170 countries operationally, with about 23,000 people working every day tirelessly to create a better tomorrow. We have about 6,000 programs that are operational every day. Across the board, we try and create a more just and democratic societies wherever we are. So that's more or less what UNDP is. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Boaz. And we thank the dean of this university for inviting the World Academy of Art and Science to come here and share with you, because we believe, well, let me ask you a question. How many of you, raise your hands, how many of you knew before he spoke that there was an institution dedicated to eliminating poverty on the planet Earth? Raise your hand. I think it's really important that every single educated person know that there is an institution dedicated to that. Because the budget of this institution, with a mandate that's so important, especially for those of you involved in the healing arts, since poverty is probably the most immediate immoral institution that we permit because we have the technical capacity to eliminate it. Everybody should know that we know how to do it. We just need the political will and the resources. The entire budget of the United Nations Program for Development has never, from my research, exceeded $7 billion a year. The budget for military, the pursuit of security and well-being of the planet through military means, last year was hovering around $2.2 trillion. And for so many people, they've already lost the security war because of their poverty. 30% of the children in South Asia are malnourished. So for them, the war is already lost. So part of what education has to do is remind us that we have a story in which we have the technical means of eliminating poverty. We have the technical skills and means through diplomacy and law of living together. But we need the story that we can do better, and we need to know the methods of doing it. And the United Nations Program for Development is a sterling example of numerous successes on the planet of addressing and helping to alleviate enormous human suffering. So it's an honor to introduce to you someone who's actually engaged in this noble work, this work that deserves our respect and is worthy of our attention and we should know about. Heriberto Bernardo is the regional team leader of the governance and peacebuilding team of the United Nations Program for Development here in Istanbul. How many of you knew that there is a United Nations Program for Development in Istanbul? Okay, let me see your hands. Yeah. His program covers 19 countries in Europe and all the way through Central Asia. He's worked in over 30 countries. So his knowledge base is broad and deep. And we should listen carefully to what he's learned from experience. Roberto, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope I'm always so happy when I'm surrounded by young people because I also feel young. So it's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. As Jonathan mentioned, my name is Robert Bernardo. Everybody calls me Bob, so please call me Bob. I'm the regional team leader for governance and peacebuilding at the Istanbul Regional Hub. So the regional hub of UNDP has around 300 people here in Istanbul, and we cover 19 program countries and territories. From as far east as Kyrgyzstan to as far west as Bosnia and Herzegovina. The team I'm leading is called the Governance and Peacebuilding Team. So the team is composed of around 18 people here in Istanbul and around 40 people in the Western Balkans mostly, where we are implementing a number of projects. We provide policy and program support on a number of topics, including on human rights, security and rule of law, on public sector reform, anti-corruption, youth programming, digital transformation, and conflict prevention and peace building. My colleague, you see my colleague here, Danny, they're standing at the right. Danny is working on digital peace building as part of our conflict prevention and peace building work, and is also working on hate speech, addressing hate speech as part of divisive narratives. So the work that the team is doing is quite broad. If any of you are, anyone from Shishli? Yeah. Great, our office is in Shishli. If you know the Istanbul Marriott Hotel, our office is in the same building, but it's different. It's called Key Plaza. Anyone who would like to visit us, know more about what we're doing, you're very much welcome. Please talk to us after. Happy to welcome you. We always welcome young men and women, young people who want to learn more about the work of the United Nations. Maybe just a few points in terms of the priorities that we're doing in the region. For UNDP, we have what we call three areas of change One is on structural transformation. And this is really about how do we advance in terms of green transition? How do we promote human rights-based inclusive processes? How do we build structures that are meant for and ready for the future? The other one is on leaving no one behind. So Jonathan in his introduction talked about everybody needs to be there. And therefore, in all of the work that we do, we always focus on who is the most marginalized, who is not there sitting in the room, who is out there that need help, but is not getting the help that they need. So we tend to focus on those that are outside of the usual meetings and conferences and try to address those that need them the most. And then the third one is on building resilience. Now, how do we make sure that structures, institutions are resilient against climate change, against disaster, both man-made and natural disasters? And how can we promote systems that allow us to recover quickly from shocks, whether economic shocks or external shocks coming from various sources? Just a quick maybe point in terms of what we are trying to address in the region. The Europe and Central Asia region is quite diverse and very complex at the moment. And globally, not only here in the region, we are talking about polycrisis. Anyone who's heard about polycrisis before? Good, thank you. So when we talk about polycrisis, we're saying there's so many crises that are happening at the same time, whether conflict, whether economic crisis, whether natural disasters, different forms of crisis that are actually intersecting, affecting one another, and making things much more difficult and complicated to address. The times that we live now is very different from the times that maybe your parents, previous generations, but also the last 5 years, very different from where we are at the moment. So we are trying to address what are these polycrises and how we can actually solve them together. At the same time, we are seeing that there's a number of countries, there's increasing rate of inequalities. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and the gap between them is constantly increasing. And it's not only around economic wealth, but also around social wealth, around participation, around inclusion, around gender. So these are inequalities that we are trying to address as well. At the same time, we are seeing declining public trust. More in most countries, the trust to public institutions are getting lower and lower. We're also seeing declining democratic trends in many countries. But at the same time, we are also seeing that the participation of young men and women in democratic and electoral processes are declining. But why? I think we all have a stake in terms of our future, and therefore we need to be part of democratic processes. But overall, in many countries, we're seeing a declining trend of young men and women, the youth participating in electoral processes. And then digital. Can anyone tell me how much is the average time that youth spend around mobile phones every day? Any guess? Too much. The average for your age is around 8 to 9 hours every day. Can you imagine? You're holding your phone 8 to 9 hours every day. You wake up, the first thing that you grab is your phone. Yeah? You sleep, the last thing that you hold is your phone. Yeah, many of you are sitting here probably looking at your phone at the same time. So digital is very much part of our lives, but are we using them productively? Everybody in this room probably has a phone, yeah, or maybe more than one phone even. But outside of this room, what we are seeing is that around 40% of the youth population does not have a phone. Or those that have phones have analog phones. Or those that have them actually find it very expensive to actually connect to the internet. So while in the cities, many of us have access to digital technology, there's a big group out there that still don't have access. So part of the work that we're doing is try to see how we can address these gaps. And there's there's a youth bulge. So there are more and more youth. The youth population is increasing. In our region, around 22% of the population are below 25 years old. And in other countries, it's around 35% of the youth population. So it's big, and it has a lot of implications to the future of education and work as well. So maybe just in terms of some provocations in terms of the role of universities and education and the role of youth going forward. First, for UNDP, when we look at educational systems, we're looking at how to make them inclusive. Everybody has access to education. Everybody can afford them. Anybody, literally anybody, should be able to access education. Second, they're future-oriented. It should prepare you to the future. In some cases, what we're seeing is that after graduating from the university, the business sector says, we still need to train them. No, they did not learn enough. So we still need to invest some more teaching or training for the graduates. So for UNDP, what we really want is to equip young men and women so that they're ready for the future of work, whether they're digital, whether they're the more regular forms of work, or new systems, new technologies that we don't have, or we cannot even imagine at the moment. So that inclusion, affordability, accessibility, and future ready is really what we are trying to hope for. And here is where we need to have stronger cooperation and alliances, not only with specific universities, but with broader number of universities who provide many of this knowledge and learning. So the work that you're doing, Jonathan, the World Academy is actually very good in terms of bringing so many of this knowledge together, because that's the only way we'll be able to learn from different institutions in different countries in terms of what's new, what can we change, what's different, and how can we actually prepare the youth for the future. And for the youth, I would like you to further think about how to maybe look at more innovative solutions to current problems that we are facing. We have a lot of conflicts, we have a lot of economic challenges, we have a lot of social issues. How can we create new solutions? And many of you who might have experienced these issues or looking at helping the country, helping the economy, would have different solutions that you can bring into this. How can we participate in stronger social cohesion and peace building? I mentioned the use of mobile technology. Around digital technology, our team, including Danny sitting here, is trying to address what we call the information pollution. Anybody who's familiar with information pollution? Very good. So many of you are familiar with this. There's so much misinformation, disinformation on the internet. And sometimes we don't even understand where is this coming from. But in many cases, we also find it very difficult to distinguish what is right, what is true, or what is a fact, or what is misinformation. So I would like to invite everyone to be more critical in terms of the information that we see and before we share them further. For UNDP, we're rolling out a number of tools, fact verification tools, and trying to strengthen regulatory frameworks around misinformation and disinformation. But for the youth, you are the heaviest consumer of data. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, so whatever apps you're using. And there's a lot of misinformation there. And I invite you to be more critical in terms of constructive and fact-based discourses. And work together. Our team has established what we call a generation nexus. This is a network of young men and women who want to support climate and environmental advocacy and strengthen youth participation in these issues. If you would like to learn more about Generation Nexus, please let me know. Let us know. Happy to connect you with our excellent youth leaders around these issues. And then finally, around education, around digital. So everybody now is probably talking about AI and emerging technologies. We know there's a lot of opportunities there. We know there's a lot of risks. But what we're seeing is that many of the traditional work systems that we have at the moment, probably in 5 years, will be very different. And therefore, for educational systems, it's very important that young men and women are actually be able to adapt to these technologies and see what their roles are in the future. I have spoken with many young men and women, and they're saying, we actually don't know what the future holds. So I don't know what degree should I apply for, what education should I apply for. And this is where the engagement with networks of institutions like this can be very helpful to see what is in store and how maybe we can provide guidance, nurturing some tools, and foresight in terms of what will be the future and how you can be ready. There's a lot more, but I'll stop here. I hope that'll be that's helpful. And if you have any questions, happy to answer.
So the UNDP is really tasked with helping to create an enabling environment in which the entire human family can flourish. That's pretty much what it is. So how many of you are studying medicine and basically utilizing the scientific method? Oh, great. Okay, so let me just give an analogy here. If I took a handful of rose seeds, you didn't know nobody knew what they were, and we burned them, it would not be wrong to say that the purpose of these seeds was to give off heat and light and turn into carbon. But if we took the same seeds and put them in an enabling environment of healthy earth and gave them water, not too long later, you'd be able to say, the purpose of the rose seeds is to give off beauty and fragrance. Well, the human being is very much like these seeds. And our duty, certainly duty of healers, both personal healers, which is what you're studying, and those of us who feel an affinity with the entire human family, our job is to create that enabling environment. And the World Academy of Art and Science is dedicated to beginning a process of developing a pedagogy, a way of teaching, and what needs to be taught to the entire human family so we can live as a human family. Now, when my grandparents saw a picture of the planet Earth from outer space, it would just look like a marble to them because they wouldn't think of it as people out beyond the stratosphere. Similarly, if they saw a mushroom cloud, they wouldn't think of a nuclear bomb. But those are the two icons before us. One of them is a borderless miracle, and the other is carbon. We're reduced to carbon. And that's what's before us. And I think the biggest problem of the day is not just climate change or nuclear weapons, but the preoccupation with how without the why. So we end up with building weapons. The more we perfect the weapon, the less security we get. Art without beauty. Religion without love and transcendence, rites, rituals, dogmas that separate us. Finances disconnected to goods and services. Philosophy without the pursuit of truth. Forgetting the why of becoming human. So one of the things I just want to say in my heart, you all should know that the most popular poet in the United States where I live is Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. And to be in a place where almost all of you are familiar with the Masnavi, a book of how to discover the rose of the heart, is really amazing to me, because even though he's the most popular poet in America, he's not sufficiently well known. So I hope that you'll spread that message as well. I now have the privilege of introducing Heriberto Tapia. He's a senior member of the research, and he has a doctorate in economics and political affairs. And he was on the writing team of a document that I urge all of you to get a hold of if you can. It's the United Nations Development report each year. And one of the great intellectual breakthroughs that this department has given the world is the concept of human security. That most of the security we learn is about militaries and sovereignty and borders, but human security focuses on people. And he was part of the team that did a report called Threats to Human Security in the Anthropocene. That's the age that we live in which human endeavors are deciding the fate of the planet. Threats to human security, of how all of us live in the Anthropocene, a call for greater solidarity, greater human solidarity. It's a brilliant report. And largely because of that, the World Academy of Art and Science has a project called Human Security for All, because we're so inspired by this concept. So it's an honor to have one of the people that worked on that report, which is truly important for the whole planet, speak to us now.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be here. So I work in the office that produces the Human Development Report. Probably many of you are familiar with the Human Development Index. This is one of the things that we do. But in this session, I'm going to talk more about human security. I'll try to share some slides. So the why human security? So why do we care about human security? Well, because human security is about things that are very fundamental. It's about fundamental freedoms, fully aligned with the capabilities approach that we use in our office. So, and we care particularly about the freedom from want, freedom from fear, and freedom to live a life with dignity. So, as Jonathan was saying, this is a shift that goes away from the idea of the security of nations that is typically used to cover the security of people. And this formulation came from a Human Development Report in 1994. However, something that we need to highlight a lot is that the ideas of human security were already at the core of some of the big advances of the formation of the United Nations. And in particular, if you read the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you will see these ideas there. So this is a very fundamental concept. And it's even more important today, we would say. As I mentioned, we produce every year the Human Development Index. And this is a picture about what has been going on with the Human Development Index over the last few years. You see in general, it's an indicator that has been growing. During the COVID years, there was a decline that was unprecedented. But the thing is that today, the Human Development Index for the world as a whole is at its highest level on record. So, however, probably you also understand that the world is in trouble in multiple fronts. So there is some sort of paradox where the world is making progress, which is objective, but at the same time, there are expressions of insecurity in the form of inequalities, in the form of climate change, in the form of rising conflict, political polarization, and the fact that people is perceiving that they don't have control over their lives, what we call agency gaps. And all of these things are very important. All of these things are also caused by humans, and they become part of what Bob was saying, the setting of polycrisis, and it's something that we need to address today. Something very important, and this is why in our report we talk about the Anthropocene, is that there are very objective reasons to feel worried about how we are changing our planet, and how this is generating already conditions that are threatening the human lives. And this is expressed in terms of climate change, biodiversity loss, new inequalities, and also the effects on violent conflict and displacement. We have a lot of data about this, and this is part of a platform that you can access online. So it's something that is very important already and is expected to get worse over the coming decades. So, but something that is making things even worse is that precisely when we need to come together in order to tackle the challenges of our time, we seem to be more divided. We seem to be more polarized. And so it looks like there is something that is in the way of us coming together to address these issues. And as Bob was saying, also we have diminishing levels of trust in the institutions that are supposed to be solving the problems, and also we have lower and lower levels of trust in one another, which is something that also is in the way of coming together. And what we are finding that the key variable that is explaining this gridlock, this inability to come together, is human insecurity, in particular the perceptions of human insecurity. We document in our report that 6 out of 7 people feel insecure around the world, and the levels of insecurities are rising in most countries where we have data, including countries that are relatively developed. So having more development, having more income is not something that that ensures that people are going to feel secure. So something very important in our research is that also human insecurity is connected with some of the problems that we see in our society. So one of them is polarization. In most countries in the world, there are rising levels of polarization, and we document how polarization is correlated with perceptions of human insecurity. This is a case of the political preferences from left to right of people who feel relatively secure. You see that the extremes are relatively small. These are in red. But when people feel insecure, the preferences for the extremes are much bigger. And this is an empirical regularity across different regions. This is another example. Another problem that we are having is lack of agency. So people feeling not in control of their own lives. And again, we see that this is highly correlated with the levels of perceived human insecurity. So this is in the horizontal axis. The higher the level of perceived insecurity, the higher the level of agency gap, of lack of agency. And again, this is happening in different regions. So it's something very robust. Another issue, the lack of trust in one another in institutions. And you can see again, in the horizontal axis, the levels of perceived human insecurity. In the vertical axis, the levels of trust, in generalized trust, trust in one another, or confidence in institutions, trust in institutions, and you see the negative relationship. So to wrap up, human security is about something very fundamental, important in itself, a fundamental freedom. But human security is not only an end, it's also a means to address the most pressing global and local challenges that we are facing today. So, and this is, let's come back to the idea of a foundational concept. So these ideas of human insecurities were embedded in the foundational documents of the United Nations because they were important. This was a lesson learned from the huge wars of the 20th century. And somehow we have to come back to this lesson because often this hasn't been in the priority of policymaking. In our reports, and you see here 2 examples, we have been developing approaches, how we address human security, and we base these approaches on 3 pillars: protection of people, the empowerment of people, and very importantly, in a highly interconnected world, the solidarity among all of us. I'm going to stop here, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. We're going to end this. We're going to end this with a vision based on realism. You all know that if a person loses a lung, they can survive with one lung. But 60 to 80% of our oxygen comes from a single cell organism in the oceans called phytoplankton. There's varieties of phytoplankton. And that phytoplankton depends on the pH and acidic balance in the oceans, which depends on the climate of the planet. And if we continue to pollute and deteriorate the environment of the phytoplankton and lose the third lung that we're all sharing, we all perish. And the phytoplankton, like pandemics, like nuclear weapons, like the financial systems of the world, don't recognize borders. We live for the first time in which the practicality of pursuing human security, the security of the entire human family, is not just a moral issue, it's a practical issue. We cannot protect the oceans at the level of the nation. It is a global issue that requires people like you and I thinking about this very breath that we're sharing with people all over the world with the third lung. Now, that's not idealism. This is very, very basic medicine. This is basic public health. This is basic personal health. So I think there's two dimensions that I try to bring into my breathing. One is the remembrance that this breath is a gift for life, not just for me, but for everybody getting the benefit of this amazing phytoplankton, which we never think about. It's in our gift as to whether we're going to be realistic and practical, or whether we're going to continue with stories that separate us. That my nation, well, I come from a nation where many people think we have to be the best and most powerful, a kind of arrogance. And there's religions that do the same thing. But I think I'm dependent on a single cell organism that I can't even see. It's in the ocean somewhere. And that's very humbling. And that's good. Thank you.